Whipping themselves into a racially focused frenzy against the Japanese, Americans could not help but intensify and destabilize racial antagonisms in their own society. In 1943, such tensions erupted into riot. When the US government forced Japanese Americans into internment camps in World War II after the attack on Pearl Harbor, one historian observed, with the Japanese removed into camps, Mexicans provided the next obvious target for racial hatred. This tells you a lot right away. Wartime fear just found a new target. In 1943, within Los Angeles, all that anger and suspicion landed on young Mexican Americans. The prejudice wasn't subtle or hidden, it was out in the open and built into that system. Captain Edward Aries, a chief of the Foreign Relations Bureau within Los Angeles County, actually claimed Mexicans were violent by nature, blaming it on their so-called Mongolian ancestry, and believing that the human sacrifices of the ancient Aztecs testified to that savagery. These kinds of racist ideas helped set the stage for the Zoot Suit Riots and the violence that followed. At the same time of the riots, about 250,000 people of Mexican descent lived in LA, mostly in poor, segregated neighborhoods. They were forced into separate schools with low expectations, many teachers finding it nonsensical to teach them due to racial beliefs that they would end up working in farms anyway. A principal of a Mexican school in San Fernando Valley even asked, "Why worry about it? They'll only end up picking beets anyway," when in conversation with a social worker who was trying to support Mexican American youth. These riots shine a brighter light on the real causes behind Mexican American circumstances. According to analysts, systematic discrimination in education, employment, housing, and social services were the root causes of the violence, and that the news, media, police, local, state, and federal government officials were responsible for fueling an anti-Mexican atmosphere. Pachucos, or Mexican American teens, created their own subculture through music and slang. The Zoot Suit style combined items such as flamboyant long coats, baggy pants, a pork pie hat, and long keychains, with shoes that have thick soles. To white America, the Zoot Suit was viewed as a sign of disrespect, especially during wartime. To young Mexican Americans, it was a style, an identity, and a sense of pride in an environment that constantly tried to erase their identities. White Americans viewed the Zoot Suit as a mockery of wartime values, because some newspaper reports argue that the Zoot Suit was derived from military uniforms and imported from Britain. Its fashion choices were disrespectful to the disciplined image of servicemen. What Zoot Suiters saw as cultural pride, many white Americans viewed as defiance, and they felt it was justifiably punishable by all means. A 12-hour notice warning was given to the press ahead of the mob's attack on young Mexican youth. On Monday evening, June 7, 1943, thousands of soldiers, sailors, and civilians stormed downtown LA, attacking every young Mexican American boy they could find. Many were beaten, stripped of their clothing, and left bleeding on the pavement. The most important part of the situation was not even half of the victims were actually wearing Zoot Suits. One defense worker, a black man with his work badge on, had his eyes gouged out. The violence had become so extreme that under Governor Earl Warren's investigations, young boys would run to police stations to not get hurt, exclaiming, "Charge me with vagrancy or anything, but please don't send me out there." It's clear that this wasn't about clothing or style. The Zoot Suit was an easy way to identify young Mexican people to scapegoat. The violence revealed who was allowed to be American in 1943, white Americans, and who wasn't, non-white Americans. By midnight on June 7th, military authorities decided that local police were unable or unwilling to handle the situation, despite the fact that 1,000 reserve officers had been called up. The entire city was declared out of bounds for military personnel. Justice only commenced once military police arrived at the riots, and it began to quiet down. Earl Warren, governor of California, understood these racist undertones behind what was really happening. He said directly, "In undertaking to deal with the cause of these outbreaks, the existence of racial prejudice cannot be ignored." Warren understood the Zoot Suit riots were giving California a reputation for racism and anti-immigrant attitudes, something he wanted to avoid, especially if he ran for president. So he started a committee dedicated to investigating the riots staffed with Mexican actors and influential people of Mexican descent, whose background became important, valuable perspectives. In the end, the Zoot Suit riots weren't really about clothing, fashion, or the so-called belief of youthful rebellion. They were fueled by fear, war, and the surge of white nationalism that forced the nation to question who truly belonged and who didn't in America. Warren made efforts to repair California's reputation. He formed committees, released his own investigation, and took other steps to reshape California's image. but the violence had already revealed a deeper, uncomfortable truth about our country. The Zoot Suit Riots exposed who was welcomed as an American and which communities were going to be targeted simply for existing. At the core, the painful chapter wasn't just random chaos, it was a clear example of how racism can hide behind a mask of patriotism. That's why this small youth subculture matters, because in the end, it wasn't just about style at all, it was about who gets to be called American.